Hi, you're watching Mastering UX. So this is part 2 of Quantitative with Qualitative. If you haven't watched part 1 of this series, I really encourage you to do that first. In that first part, we really get into the foundational things of really understanding what is quantitative and what is qualitative. We see that there's certain kinds of things that there's shortcomings to each of the different types. We also see that there are certain kind of things that are strengths. But more importantly, we see that the two types of research go hand in hand, and that they can inform one another, and they really shouldn't be looked as something that's in competition with one another, but they're things that should be done in conjunction. So for this reason, I put together the second part to really show you in one cohesive practical example how the different types of research can come together, each type of research lending itself well to a certain part of the project. So again, really want to encourage you to stay tuned and watch this practical example. Okay, so I want to walk you through a practical example. So let me set this up. Let's pretend you're working on a legacy website. It's massive. It's grown over years. There's a lot of things to be done on this website. There's strengths in the website. There's things that you're afraid of getting rid of. And so the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at the web analytics. You're going to want to see how it's performing. You're going to want to know the strengths and the weaknesses and find out important statistics such as what are the browsers, how much is mobile being used. There's a lot of things that you can glean from this, but there's still a need to do your qualitative research. And then here's something that I think gets overlooked is when you're starting off a project, you're going to want to baseline something that's a little bit more objective than user interviews. So the business really likes Net Promoter Score as some kind of benchmark on how the company's doing with loyalty. And so you might do something like this. You issue this kind of survey, it goes out, and this establishes a baseline, which you're going to do again when you finish the project. And then you can have a feedback session, and this is qualitative. You can ask the questions, and if there's a certain page that wasn't performing, you can ask why that they didn't have it. Was there any kind of pain points? I've worked on projects where it was very enlightening that certain things, sometimes there was a performance issue only for a certain user group, and we couldn't find that out really even the quantitative data. At other times, you might find that the user is going to the page, but they're really not happy at all. So there's a lot of things that can be uncovered. Either know the statistics might lead you to draw a certain conclusion. Okay, so now you're coming to the point where you're ready to design a new site. You've kind of learned some things. You know the pain points. You have some idea of the low-hanging fruits, what can be improved on the website. And so you start developing some wireframes, and you realize at this point that you're taking risks. You're not sure about yourself. So you develop wireframes, and you just do some concept testing. They're very low fidelity, and you put this in front of your in front of users. And then you get some feedback on that, and then you begin to develop more sophisticated interactive prototypes. There's more fidelity to it. There's more detail. There's more pages. And, and I think the meat of the project, you're going to want to have interactive prototypes and continuously iterate on these. Maybe every 2 weeks you may test. Of course, all of this depends on what your business is comfortable with and how much you can do user testing. And something I want to remind you of is don't be afraid to mix and match each time different kind of testing methodologies. The first time you might do a usability test, but then the next time you might realize that you get a brand new section. It's very experimental. Then you do a concept test. The next time you have some feeling that the navigation isn't so intuitive. So you do a card sorting to see how users would think about how to organize the information. And then, anyways, it can go on and on. You can do a first click test. You can come back. You could spend most of your time doing usability testing. But, it's okay to play it by ear on an iterative basis. So, while you're going through this process, hopefully your project, you're learning more, you're seeing more. And even when you're doing, say, a usability study, you're gaining insights about the user, you're learning about the user, not just on how they feel specifically to your website, but you're gaining insights about that person because you're talking with people. You spend a lot of time getting to know the different types of personas. And then at this point, you launch the website. The development team has built out all the things that you've built out. And then you're going to come back to the beginning. You're going to do your Net Promoter Score again, and you're going to look at your web analytics. And of course, at this point, it's always tough when you go live. You realize that people need time to get used to your website. But anyways, it's still a good practice, and you want to capture that metric. If there was a ramping up period, you want to capture that metric. And then as some time goes by, maybe 3 months, and that's kind of maybe a fair apples to apples comparison, that's the point where you're going to want to see, apples to apples. We did all these changes. We spent $1.5 million on a project. How did we do? We did all this research. This is the point. Hopefully the fruits of your labor have paid off, but you want to have something in place that's quantitative to validate for sure that all the things that you were hearing, all the insights that you were gaining, all the empathy, all this kind of qualitative, subjective research that you've gained has kind of culminated in a product that is more valuable to the business and the user. Okay, so there you have it. It's not quantitative versus qualitative, right? It's quantitative with qualitative. The two really support one another. If you're doing quantitative research, before you're about to react upon that data, you realize that you really need to still find out why people are taking a certain action. And when you're doing qualitative research, then you're still going to want to know objectively, by representation, how many people are doing certain things and how did your changes make progress or move the needle for your objective metrics. Again, qualitative, it's about the narrative. There's limitations, there's interpretation, there's some things that are not fully objective about it. And with objective data, there can be shortcomings to only knowing what people did versus knowing why. So the last point I want to leave you off with is you really want to, don't feel bad if you don't have all the methodologies, and especially as a user experience practitioner, it's probably likely that you're not a whiz in quantitative data. In fact, even people that think they're good at quantitative data, a lot of times they really need a data scientist to isolate the variables and to really find out if there's not a factor that's causing something to be a correlation but not a causation. But what I wanted to say is you really want to leverage, just think of it as quantitative data and the people that are partners that are better at quantitative data. Those are your partners. Those are the ones that you can team up with. And on the flip side, you have qualitative insight to offer up to the people who are doing quantitative data. And the two really should be playing hand in hand. This is pretty much everything I wanted to say. I really appreciate qualitative data, but I also realize that I need the quantitative data as well. I hope, this kind of view and perspective kind of helps you in working on a real world project that you're on.